Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist, Sam Stein, managing editor at The Bulwark, and Barbara McQuade, former U.S. attorney and current MSNBC legal analyst. All right, so Aaron, walk us through the most recent proposed buyouts.
So this proposal that you just talked about from Health and Human Services is something that we understand people got emails about on Friday. Some 80,000 employees in that department received these emails saying that they would have the option to take this voluntary separation incentive payment of $25,000 in order to end their employment with the federal government. This comes as we've seen other agencies also talk about similar programs. We've seen some agencies also talk about early retirement. For example, we just got a note from one of our producers that NASA is offering voluntary early retirement now to some of its employees as a part of this workforce reduction. We know that this week there is a deadline for all the federal departments to present phase one of their plans to reorganize their departments, really to reduce the workforce in a significant way. We talked about mass layoffs a couple of weeks ago coming across the federal government as a result of these reorganization plans. These first couple of steps, this idea of this voluntary separation, this buyout offer, the voluntary early retirement, those are all mechanisms that are available to the departments with the approval of OPM, sort of ahead of a mass layoff, ahead of a reduction in force, as the government calls it. And so we can expect to see this sort of thing play out. The deadline for HHS employees is this Friday. We'll likely see other agencies take advantage of similar programs, similar efforts before, Katie, I think we start to see mass layoffs across the federal government over the next several months.
Sam, part of the blowback has been that this is just, it's very broad brush. You are letting go, either firing or offering buyouts to people who are necessary for the federal workforce and are working in sensitive agencies. HHS is a sensitive agency that oversees health protocol in this country. We can talk about NASA. We can talk about others. Why has there not been an adjustment in the way these things are proposed, or has there been that we're just not aware of, in order to not be in a situation where they're firing people and then rehiring them a week later when they realize, oh wait, we need that task force?
So yeah, there has been a somewhat of an adjustment, right? So DOGE obviously went in. They just took a chainsaw to multiple agencies and then quickly realized that they had fired people in critical functions. As you know, one of the most ridiculous ones was officials at the nuclear safety facility in Los Alamos, and they quickly realized, oh my God, we need to rehire these folks. So we're seeing a little bit more prudence, I suppose, with respect to that going forward. And we've also seen DOGE kind of accommodate for the fact that they've made mistakes. You've noticed on a couple occasions up on the Hill, Elon Musk has talked to Republican lawmakers and said, here's my cell phone. If you have a problem, we can reverse the cuts. And then there's been lawmakers who come out and said, I've successfully petitioned Elon Musk to reverse these cuts in my state and my district. And it raises the question, well, are Republican lawmakers the only ones who are going to be able to get access to Elon Musk and DOGE to do this? The other thing I would just note is that we've seen friction within the cabinet and with the cabinet and Elon specifically, in which cabinet officials are saying, hey, we know our agencies better. We know where to cut and who we want to cut. And having 20 to 25-year-old DOGE bros come in with an Excel spreadsheet and say, you know what, this person's got probationary employee in front of their name, we should cut them. That's not the most efficient way to do it. And so we're seeing adjustments here and there. But again, this is all prelude to the fact that what we've seen so far is just a small amount of the cuts. And when we get to the RIF section, we're going to see huge reorganizations of the federal workforce, and that could just set off a whole nother round of what we've been dealing with so far.
Where have the courts fallen on the legality of these mass buyouts, Barbara?
Well, we've seen some success in plaintiffs seeking temporary restraining orders in some of these cases because of the need for things like due process, the needs for things like the ability for employees to go through the Merit Systems Protection Board. They can't simply be fired. Now, if you are offering a buyout, that's a contract, and those have been upheld. There have been some lawsuits designed to prevent the buyout offers that have not been successful. So I think legally, if you offer someone a buyout and they accept it, consensually, that is a contract. So I think those are going to be upheld. But, you know, as we've heard, the foolishness to me of this exercise is that Elon Musk and Doge have not been using a scalpel. They've been using a hatchet. And even this newest proposal of 80,000 employees at HHS sounds to me like a hatchet. And so it risks removing people who are there providing vital services for the good of the American people, and perhaps has an eye toward ultimately privatizing some of this work. But of course, running a government like a business, we have seen in too many instances, does not put public virtue above bottom line profit. And that's why I think it is so concerning and dangerous to those of us who've worked in government.
On the subject of that tension between some cabinet officials and Elon Musk, there was reporting in the New York Times last week about a big blow up in the White House between people like Marco Rubio and Elon Musk, talking about the way that he's just trying to get in to cut everybody. And these cabinet leaders are saying, wait, hold on, let us be in charge of this. You shouldn't be getting into our departments. Aaron, what does NBC News have on that meeting, and what is the White House saying?
Well, excuse me, the reporting has been consistent that there was some pushback particularly from Secretary Rubio and from Secretary Duffy, the transportation secretary, on Elon Musk and some of the ways in which he's been executing these changes in staffing. They had been saying, according to sources, that they believe it was better for them to handle that sort of thing, to be able to identify who are the best people to keep and who are the people that needed to be let go. And so the narrative that came out of that meeting is that this was an aggressive back and forth between these three gentlemen. And all weekend long, we've heard the administration really pushing back on that, saying that there was no blow up in this cabinet meeting that happened. I believe it was on Thursday of last week. I want you to hear what President Trump himself had to say about this. I think he was asked about it on Air Force One last night as he was returning to D.C. from Florida. Listen.
I don't think the tensions are high. Look, Elon's a very special person, and these cabinet people are special people. You know, these are very successful people, or they wouldn't have gotten, you know, they've attained the highest heights of government. That doesn't mean they don't have a little bit of an argument here and there about something, or maybe personnel arguments.
So the president seemingly suggesting there that he has surrounded himself with a lot of big personalities and people who have opinions and people who are now really involved in the operation of the agencies to which they've been appointed, Katie. And so the idea that there would be disagreement in a cabinet meeting may not be that unusual. At least that's the suggestion from the president.